I'd like to begin today's video with a quote from the great American Civil War General Robert E. Lee. Lee was probably the greatest general of that horrible conflict who found himself on the wrong side of the war as a result of accident of birth. Lee's quote is as follows: "It is well that war is so terrible, otherwise we would grow too fond of it." This quote is often misinterpreted as an endorsement of war or an affection for war that isn't rooted in the best intentions or inclinations as far as concerns for humanity. The fact of the matter is Lee was all too familiar with war, and he was all too familiar with the type of exhilaration that it brought to soldiers and even civilians, especially at the outset of a conflict, and particularly in the aftermath of a triumph. He understood that this was a seductive effect of war, and his comments are basically cautionary ones, and that is that if we don't remember how terrible war is and how terrible war can be, we may engage in it too readily. Unfortunately, the United States has now become convinced, or at least its policymakers have become convinced, of the possibility of non-terrible wars, much in contradiction to Lee's warning. Because of our air superiority, cruise missiles, precision-guided bombs, and unmanned drones, and the prospects of future robot infantry, we believe that we can conduct bloodless wars, at least bloodless with regard to the sacrifice that we are likely to make. This is best evidenced in the failed policy of shock and awe that led us into the horribly misguided war in Iraq. And it belies the fact that the best intentions of technological superiority are no guarantee that we will not end up with boots on the ground. I want to be clear, I'm not trying to say that the use of such force isn't occasionally successful, but the successes are uncommon. The best example of a success was the US-led NATO intervention in Kosovo in 1999. The parameters that to some extent characterized that situation were that we were going up against a rational opponent, and by rational I don't mean well-intentioned. That the political structure that we were opposing was united, and that there was domestic unity behind the war that was being conducted. I'm talking about the Serbian domestic political unity, which also means that there's a way to target negotiation and eventual concession. And the most important feature of that particular intervention is that the capitulation on the part of our opponent avoided a worst case outcome for them. Serbia had overreached in trying to ethnically cleanse Kosovo, and as a result, their fallback position was basically to leave their primary political dominion intact. This is something that was an encouraging alternative to being defeated in all ways. The failures of this possibility of quick and bloodless technological warfare are best evidenced by the US-led invasion of Iraq in 2003. There we are characterized, the situation was characterized by having an irrational opponent. I believe that there's even a clinical diagnosis that's been used to describe rulers such as Saddam Hussein, and that is malignant narcissism. These people are not in touch with reality, especially with regard to calculations and benefit for themselves even, or their people. The situation in Iraq was also characterized by the fact that there was a lack of domestic political unity. It was politically fragmented. That really led to the possibility that a clear military outcome wouldn't be necessarily a clear domestically political outcome. Who would be in charge, and who would be there to negotiate, and how would things move forward once the bombs stopped dropping? And the other thing that characterized the failure in Iraq in terms of the application of technology to solve the problem is that for the people in power at the outset of the war, capitulation actually was a worst case outcome. So they were damned if they did and damned if they didn't. It's hard to get people to negotiate when essentially you're demanding that they cede power. They consider that to be the worst possible outcome for them. Well, this brings me to Libya, and I want to say very clearly that I haven't analyzed the details that underlie the situation in Libya that carefully. My inclination is to say that they actually more resemble Iraq pre-U.S. invasion, and that is that we have an irrational opponent. We have a highly highly fragmented domestic political situation. And at least with regard to our opponent, the insufficiently maligned Muammar Gaddafi, capitulation is a worst case outcome. So it's not clear exactly how he negotiates an end, at least without ceding power, and it's unlikely that he would do that. So I'm not sure what will happen in Libya, and maybe that's the point, or a major point of this video, and that is that I'm not sure that anyone is very clear on what's going to happen as a result of our intervention in Libya. A lot of this impetus for the airstrikes has been buoyed by such political platitudes or adages as follows. All that is necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. I'm very sympathetic with the notion that people have to act in order to prevent evil. But unfortunately, this particular platitude is wielded as though it was a license to do almost anything. It's almost used as an equivalent of don't just stand there, do something. I'd like to contribute my own platitude to the circulating platitude bucket. It's a variation on that one, which I believe is attributed to Edwin Burke. I'll take responsibility for this one myself, and that is as follows. Much that is necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do something without thinking things through. I'm going to close with my usual hope, and that is, let's remember we are all in this together. I genuinely wish that the conflict in Libya is brought to a swift conclusion and one that is favorable for the purposes of democracy and people of goodwill everywhere. Thank you very much.